Hello. In this lecture, I want to explore the various ways we can think about what audiences do, and how we might think of audiences as collaborating in the production of media experiences. A common misconception is that audiences are simply consumers at the endpoint of a linear top-down production chain. Feedback in this system is typically considered in terms of sales and popularity. Media producers know to make more of a thing because it sells well and makes a good return on investment. Historically, the audience is framed as being entirely passive. However, more recently, what we call the creative industries have been forced to take into consideration the collective agency of a type of audience that we call fans. As you may know, the creative industries includes a wide range of enterprises, from film and fashion to the creative and performing arts, toys and games to photography, architecture and design. However, these industries are usually only considering fans in terms of their potential further consumption. My aim for the first part of this lecture is to contribute to your understanding of the critical language and theoretical frameworks that have changed the way we think about audiences over time. I also want to give you a range of ways to think about audiences as participants and potential collaborators in future projects that you will work on in what we might call the niche creative industries. And I'll explain what that means in part 2. Much of our understanding of what an audience is and what an audience does comes from attempts to understand the concept of meaning. Although these ideas are often expressed in terms of meaning, it is not meaning that we are ultimately concerned with in this lecture, but rather what audiences are doing with meaning and how that informs their role as an audience. The Frankfurt School, or the Institute for Social Research, was established in Frankfurt, Germany in 1918, and it featured several important theorists including Walter Benjamin, Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, and Herbert Marcuse, and many others. Together, this group was using Marxist-informed theory, as well as new ideas at the time from sociology and psychology to critique modernity, capitalism, and mass culture. They were interested in examining people, society, and culture and attempted to figure out why the working class wasn't going to overthrow their political and economic masters. Leader of the Frankfurt School, Max Horkheimer, recognized that people didn't actually behave in logical ways, and that we don't really act in our collective or individual best interests. He argued that capitalism had successfully integrated the working class into its system, structuring a divide between those in long-term employment and those under or non-employed. According to Horkheimer, capitalism is successful because of the way it convinces the working class to maintain the status quo and maintain what jobs, property, wealth, and advantages they do have. This is the effect of cementing the class division between the wealthy elite and the middle class, and between the middle class and the working class. Horkheimer, like Theodor Adorno, examined the economic, psychological, political, cultural, and social forces at the time to shed light on the various ways that capitalism encourages conformity, and this became known as critical theory. Critical theory serves as the first point on our trajectory for thinking about audiences. It argues that audiences make meaning according to the ways that the ruling class dictates. It views audiences as passive receivers of messages that convince them that the status quo is in their best interests. In 1933, as the National Socialist German Workers' Party took control in Germany, the Frankfurt School and its intellectuals went into exile, eventually moving to Columbia University in New York. Horkheimer and Adorno would go on to write the Dialectic of Enlightenment, in which they argued that modern totalitarianism originated during the Enlightenment. They argued that the period of history known for the turn to reason and rationality laid the foundation for objectivism, conformity, and standardization applied to the whole of society, leading to the rise of Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, and capitalist America, in which individuals are treated as merely parts of a giant machine. This view led to a critique of what Adorno called the culture industries. And he said, in its appeal to the masses, culture today is infecting everything with sameness. Critical theory saw popular culture as a system with the unanimous goal of making money. The culture industries simply sought to please as many people as much of the time as possible, and therefore had no artistic, creative, social, educational, or indeed cultural merit. Adorno and the Frankfurt School argued that the sameness of mass culture was depriving audiences and robbing them of their individuality and self-expression that would assist in the resistance of totalitarianism. So it is unsurprising that these theories have been recently resurrected, as can be seen in this article from Stuart Jeffries in The Guardian, responding to Trump's victory in the US election in 2016. Responding to how print, radio, and screen media had been so useful in establishing and maintaining the Nazi Party through propaganda, Adorno viewed the culture industries as having a terrible effect on audiences' ability to discern and think critically. Adorno, for example, criticized audiences for liking popular music, such as jazz, over more important culturally significant contributions like classical music. This is the same type of argument that is used against social media and platforms like YouTube. Their view was that audiences don't know better and should not be encouraged to enjoy such unrefined tastes, because this would limit their ability to engage in opposing authoritarianism and capitalism. The main problem with this theory is that it views audiences in this model without agency. Agency refers to the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make rational choices. The idea is contrasted with structures that influence those choices, such as class, age, religion, gender, ethnicity, genes, education, culture, and so on. Of course, there's much more to critical theory. However, I want to move on and start to plot out a trajectory for thinking about audiences and briefly discuss two models that originate in the 1960s and 1970s that build on the critical model, namely the communication model and the cultural model. The communication model comes from Marshall McLuhan's approach to understanding media in 1964 that proposed that a communication medium itself should be the attention of study, not the messages that it carries. This has important implications for audiences in the internet era, which Ted Metju unpacked for you in a previous lecture. So I'm going to move on to the cultural model. This model emerges from the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. The Birmingham School, as it is known, was founded in 1964 by Richard Hoggart, and I'm going to focus on the work of Stuart Hall, who led the school for 10 years from 1969, and his model of understanding audiences called encoding, decoding. Hall was building on the foundations of the dialectical model and what's known as the structuralist model of meaning, established by thinkers like Louis Althusser and Roland Barthes, which inherited the Marxist understanding of how audiences were structured according to ideological state apparatuses, ISAs. These include schools, legal systems, the media, banks, religion, corporations, and governments, as well as other institutions that act both explicitly and unconsciously to reinforce the power of the ruling class through ideology, by producing systems in which audiences internalize and reproduce these ideologies. ISAs employ a linguistic discourse approach to domination that is reproduced by institutional practice and structures. Television, for example, works for powerful interests like nation-states and corporations, even when they are critical of individual governments and companies. The Marxist theory of cultural hegemony by Antonio Gramsci is the idea that the ruling class manipulates the value systems of a society in ways that convince its subjects to consent willingly. An example of this operating in the ideological state apparatus of screen media is the notion of professional codes, or otherwise known as technical competencies and production values. Barthes, mentioned previously, argued that media have become myth-makers who are capable of producing rules and conventions through the construction of ideology embedded in professional codes. For example, before the internet, celebrities were constructed as mythical people with qualities that lifted them above ordinary folk. Of course, these qualities were all just the result of the professional codes of institutions like Hollywood. We see this today with social media, particularly Instagram, and the use of filters and photoshopping by media influencers to construct their idea of their best selves. Hall described these codes as having political and ideological order imprinted in them that have become themselves institutionalized, including scripting, editing, camera operation, music arrangement, directing and acting, as well as, of course, stars and celebrities, among others. Through these codes, media producers are able to encode preferred meaning and embed ideology and specific values via notions like professionalism, scene selection, even narrative and information order. These are not objective, but highly selective and deliberate. The critical theorists were anxious that these codes create unthinking, obedient citizens who are slaves to capitalist ideology. All media, argues Hall, encode their products with the interests of the dominant hegemonic forces structurally bound in the professional codes, even when the meanings of the texts themselves might be in direct opposition to those forces. However, Stuart Hall's approach is enormously important because he reworked the structuralist and critical theories of ideology into a systematic theory of media audiences, which recognized the broader social and cultural functions of a text that emphasized the agency of audiences. Hall's approach criticized Althusser and Gramsci and others for assuming that the audience simply internalizes ideology, and that mass media merely functions to reproduce capitalist and other ideological values. Hall recognized that audiences don't just consume and replicate capitalist values, but rather have much more agency, and indeed even have the capacity for entirely subversive responses to the products that they regularly consume and enjoy. Audiences, argued Hall, can exert agency over the intended professional codes as they actively decode media messages. Hall's model assumes a direct correspondence between the meaning that is intended by a sender and how that meaning is received and understood by an audience receiver, but asserts that this process is not symmetrical. Indeed, Hall identified three broad categories of reading that audiences engage in when decoding media messages: the dominant reading, the negotiated reading, and the oppositional reading. A dominant reading is in line with the intended meaning of the professional codes of a text, and the audience members accept the preferred meaning encoded by the producer. A negotiated reading occurs where the audience may accept some of the preferred meaning of a media production, but oppose others. An oppositional reading occurs when the audience member may completely disagree with the preferred meanings of a media production, decoding the message in a contrary way. For those interested in applying these ideas further, the recommended reading to accompany this lecture is Adrian Shaw's 2017 article, Encoding and Decoding Affordances, Stuart Hall and Interactive Media Technologies. So that brings us to the next point on the trajectory for thinking about what audiences do, and that is the idea of participation, in which the audiences are directly collaborating via the encoding, decoding processes that's involved with textual production, distribution, and reception of media experiences. The core themes of participatory culture, as it's known, were proposed by Professor Henry Jenkins, a fan scholar, who popularized the notion that fan labor is a form of civic contribution. He argues that fans are rogue audiences who go well beyond the standard decoding to actively poach popular culture in order to construct their own cultural framework through fan fiction, artwork, costumes, and cosplay, as well as music, video, and other forms of participatory media. All audiences, argues Jenkins, appropriate the media they consume to some degree in the construction of their personal identities and their social relations with others. This occurs naturally when in conversation with others, using phrases like, "have you seen?" Furthermore, these participatory practices are magnified and accelerated by the internet, which expanded the creative industries by challenging the logic of media production under the industrial paradigm that only considered audiences as consumers. Jenkins' ideas are echoed by the Australian media scholar Professor Graham Turner, who describes culture as the site where meaning is generated and experience becomes a determining, productive field through which social realities are constructed, experienced, and interpreted. Two examples of this idea of audiences in action are the prosumer and the producer. Futurist Alvin Toffler coined the term prosumer in 1980 to refer to the idea of an expert consumer, someone like a fan. Sociologists George Ritzer and Nathan Jurgensen have argued that even the earliest forms of capitalism are characterized by continuous cycles between production and consumption. One cannot exist without the other. And they use the term to suggest how the internet has reclaimed and recognized this conceptual proximity. Ritzer, however, is concerned with the type of exploitation that is common in prosumer capitalism, particularly the unpaid labor and the offering of products at no cost, largely provided by fan communities. As the internet paradigm is marked by an abundance of content, not scarcity, the free provision of content means that prosumers are often not compensated for their contribution. However, this approach is fundamentally problematized by this view of contribution or collaboration as unpaid labor. Axel Bruns's concept of producage does not frame the audience contribution as unpaid labor, but rather as a type of participation that occurs through networks of collaboration around which communities emerge and thrive. In its earliest days, Wikipedia was an excellent example of producage, and the wiki model still works as a good example of participatory media, especially within media fandoms. Producage occurs where a platform empowers users to build content from the ground up. Participants might not have equal skills or expertise, but have the equal ability to make a notable contribution to the project. It is here we start to see a more nuanced approach appearing in the participatory media model, with Mirko Tobias Schaffer's identification of the difference between the implicit and explicit contribution or participation of audiences. Implicit participation can be as simple as liking a Facebook group or page, favoriting a tweet or Instagram post, or upvoting or downvoting a post on a subreddit. Explicit participation occurs where fans are creating art or fiction, producing YouTube videos discussing elements of a show, or even simply making comments, or perhaps organizing community events via Facebook. And here we can see all levels of Hall's encoding and decoding in operation. In his study of video game culture, Joost Raysens identified three types of audience participation: interpretation, reconfiguration, and construction. Interpretation occurs where the audience are actively decoding or deconstructing the meaning of a text. This is the primary level of participation, where the audience is making meaning, actively deconstructing the ideas in the text beyond what is operating at the literal surface. Raysens describes this as breaking through the cracks in the text to disrupt its superficial functioning. Reconfiguration is the act of making strategic choices, and this is where the participant goes outside the text to add meaning by liking a Facebook post, sharing a YouTube video, or adding a video to a playlist. Indeed, playlists are a long-standing form of media reconfiguration. Construction or creation is the third and most pronounced form of participation that makes modifications of a text or adds something to a text that wasn't there previously. This can be a minor contribution, such as making a meme or a GIF, posting or adding comments to a video on YouTube, or a major act like a total video game modification, an audio-visual mashup, or a work of fan fiction that remixes elements of the primary text. Fandom is an obvious form of reconfiguration and construction or creation, as it enables the participant to control the transformation of a body of information to meet its needs and interests. Successful media operations now rely heavily on participatory fan cultures to market and advertise their products through social media, but largely fail to understand the true potential of the internet paradigm and emergent media. often resulting in attempts to curtail and constrain fan activity and participatory culture through ideological state apparatuses, particularly the law, intellectual property, notably trademark and copyright restrictions. So that's the last part of the audience theory trajectory, and starts to lay the foundation for the idea of thinking about how audiences are participating and collaborating in the production of media. In order to apply these ideas to examples in part 2, I'm going to focus on a specific form of collaboration with audiences, conversation, which transforms the idea of producing media texts into the idea of producing niche media experiences. This form of audience collaboration is made possible by the dialogic function of the internet paradigm, which collapses the distinction between encoding and decoding in meaning making and the implicit and explicit participation of audiences, while increasing the agency of audiences as a result. In part 2, we're going to narrow this focus even further and look at the production of media experiences in what can be called the niche creative industries. The niche creative industries involve specialist knowledge, paratextual media, conversational experiences, and speculative collaboration. We're going to examine these concepts across 4 main platforms: YouTube, Twitch, Patreon, and Discord. YouTube was created by 3 ex-PayPal employees in 2005, and Google purchased the platform for $1.5 billion in 2006. The most recent quarterly reports put the company's annual revenue at around $15 billion. As of late 2019, more than 500 hours of video content are uploaded to YouTube every minute. Much of this content is specialist knowledge, such as fan reviews, discussions, and critiques. Most of this content lacks the identifiable production codes associated with the legacy media and broadcast industries. I can't help but think that Horkheimer and Adorno would be horrified by the amateur nature of shitty internet videos and the platform as a whole. Adorno especially, I suspect, would see the billions of hours of vlogs, reviews, how-to videos, TikTok collections, conspiracy theories, and hobby videos as evidence of the mindlessness of popular culture, leading us to replicate the status quo and sleepwalk into totalitarianism, fascism, and worse. The critical thing to remember is that YouTube was built by its users. It is one of the biggest examples of participatory media. Much like the introduction of the home video recorder and the availability of video recording on smartphones, YouTube introduced an unprecedented degree of agency for its users seeking to express themselves via the screen. The question of quality is largely irrelevant to the massive numbers of YouTube audiences because the platform has become a hub for experiencing specialist knowledge. Many of the high-profile YouTube channels do replicate the production codes of broadcast media, but adapt them for their interests and their niche audiences. This makes the platform the ideal space for prosumer media, in the sense that Alvin Toffler imagined it, the professional consumer. In May 2020, Linus Tech Tips was the 4th most watched technology channel on the platform, with almost 11 million subscribers and 5,000 videos. The channel has hundreds of millions of views each month, and the number of views totals into the billions. Its star persona, Linus Sebastian, is a YouTube micro-celebrity. Micro not in the sense of the audience, but in the sense of the niche in which he operates, which is to showcase highly specialized products in the tech industry, skewing heavily towards the high-end PC user crossing over into the gamer market. Another example of prosumer media is the Khan Academy. Translated into several languages, the channel has 5.7 million subscribers and nearly 7.5 thousand videos, tens of millions of views, and has transformed the way mathematics and other fields are taught all around the world. It is interesting to note that this channel is often criticized for the lack of professional codes associated with the formal qualifications in teaching. It also lacks many of the professional codes associated with the educational content of broadcast media. Yet the Khan Academy has been enormously important for those without access to formal education and to those struggling in traditional educational experiences. Given the hundreds of millions of comments on both of these channels, we can situate them on a graph ranging from active to collaborative audiences, somewhere around here. With large-scale success, YouTube has become a platform for much smaller but equally successful channels, engaging with audiences across a fantastic range of niche interests, including video games, fashion and cosmetics, health, fitness, lifestyle, review and criticism, sport, music, dance, travel, technology, cooking, education, even pranks and challenges, design, art, and animation. It's been the site of entirely new genres that are unique to the platform, with their own hybridized production code, such as daily vlogging and commentary, reaction videos, let's play and unboxing videos, conspiracy theories, tutorials and how-tos, and of course ASMR, among many, many others. The majority of these genres are what we can call paratextual. Literary theorist Gerard Genette wrote about paratexts as the liminal materials that accompany a printed text. With a book, for example, the paratexts include the cover, the index, the author name, and the publisher information. Paratexts for a DVD include the cover, but also the menu, and more importantly, other materials like the special features, the director's commentary, the behind-the-scenes materials, as well as bloopers and deleted scenes. With the internet, however, paratexts are divorced from their physical containers, and the text itself starts to stretch out across multiple platforms and become entwined in the process of intercommunication. Intercommunication is an elaborate layering of types and forms of communication that are filtered and directed and engaged with by particular individuals in interpersonal ways. This is not transmedia, but rather the way that texts become enrolled in the presentation of our online selves, our personas. Intercommunication is a result of the interpretation and decoding processes of participatory media, in which individuals are appropriating paratexts and reconfiguring them in order to encode their personal expression of themselves online. Not just fans, although fans might be described as experts in this process, but simply liking a Facebook page, tweeting about an episode, commenting on a subreddit or YouTube video. You become an active participant in its intercommunication, not only in terms of your agency of expression, but also in terms of the algorithmic logic of capitalism that is expressed by these systems. A Netflix series, for example, will have an official Facebook page, a subreddit, a Twitter account, and all of its content creators, including producers, directors, actors, and crews, and fans, all become paratexts for that series. The show might have merchandise and associated products that also serve as paratexts in the intercommunication of individual identity expression. The line between the official and unofficial paratexts begins to blur through participation. This process becomes so active that it can be considered as a form of collaboration, if not in the direct production of the text, certainly in its curation, distribution, and presentation. Fan groups on Facebook, moderators of a subreddit, YouTube channels analyzing and discussing the series, fan-made wikis, and so on, all of which is contributing to their personal online persona, but also building the economic potential of the niche creative industries associated with the paratextual media production of those series. All fandom is paratext, and this has become a large part of the niche creative industries. It used to be that derivative works were frowned on as part of the elitist notions of cultural hegemony, but is now considered a marker of success. Take Minecraft, for example. The economic impact of this game is so immense that it has its own ecology of paratextual media. This is a big rabbit hole that we could disappear down, so let's just keep it focused on one example, Hermitcraft. Hermitcraft is a collective of 27 Minecraft players who became YouTube and Twitch streamers. 23 of which upload Minecraft content regularly to both platforms. These are audiences of the game who have created their own massively successful derivative franchise from the paratext of the YouTube genre of what's called Let's Play videos. The team's Minecraft server acts as a shared world and is restarted every season, and each season players can download that world to play for and explore for themselves. First created in 2012, Hermitcraft is now in its 7th season with around 30 million YouTube subscribers. Episode 1 of the latest season currently has around 4.5 million views. Current estimates by Forbes put 1 million views in terms of advertising revenue at about $5,000. But then you can add sponsorship, Twitch streaming subscriptions, merchandising, and other revenue streams as part of that. So this is a very lucrative paratext. But not all niche and paratextual media command such a high audience, and it's not necessary to think that you have to have millions of participants in order to have successful collaborations with your audiences. One of the reasons for Hermitcraft's success is that production costs and professional codes are absolutely minimal. That's not to say that the series or its streamers aren't building their own professional codes or various ideological positions associated with those codes. But they're not so much associated with what's on the screen, but rather the conversational experience that is going on and around because of what's going on the screen. I also want to point out that many YouTubers are having to respond and negotiate with the ISAs of the YouTube platform itself, but also its regulators. These channels and their participants have had to adapt to governmental and commercial regulatory mechanisms in the form of advertising and algorithmic recommendation systems, as well as the uncertain management of the advertising revenue system, and multiple iterations of the automated policing of intellectual property rights, censorship, deplatforming, and of course, most recently, content aimed at younger children. As the platform has responded to these challenges, YouTube has decreased the value of individual content creators and their participatory audiences, while increasing the value of safer, more traditional content coming from the broadcast media industries, particularly large networks. As a company, YouTube is acting more and more like a cable company, and this has profound implications for participatory audiences. While YouTube does have live streaming, and there are other platforms in this space like Mixer and even Facebook, Twitch is perhaps the most responsible platform for establishing the new professional codes of live streaming as part of the conversational experience in the niche creative industries. Twitch was created in 2011 as a rebranding from Justin TV, which was a general interest streaming platform. Until recently, Twitch was devoted entirely to video games, but it has now become a place to watch visual artists, graphic designers, musicians, cosplay creators, and other professional craftspeople practicing, performing, and producing their art. Twitch was purchased by Amazon in 2014 for around USD 970 million. In the same year, it went viral for a channel which used a command chat translation bot to enter player commands into a chat window. Called Twitch Plays Pokemon, this event has the Guinness World Record for the most participants in a single player game, with 1,165,140 users contributing commands to the stream, which you can see on the right-hand side here. This points to the most important feature of live streaming, which is not the televisual content of the stream, so much as the experience that is produced by the relationship between the participants and the streamer in the text chat. The key to this system is not always responding to every chat comment, because this becomes impossible with large numbers of viewers, but rather the conversational experience that emerges through the collaboration with the audience community that evolves over time and involves chat, bots, memes, emotes, and a range of other interactions. These professional codes are still being worked out and actually differ from channel to channel, particularly as they are undergoing negotiation with the company and with users and their communities. The content and behavior policies for Twitch streamers are under constant revision as the company attempts to negotiate a space between other conversational platforms like Omegle or more adult entertainment activities like webcamming. The conversational experience is entirely participatory, as the audience engages in the real-time decoding and interpretation via the conversation occurring in the chat, which is then encoded as part of the experience that can be reviewed at a later time, such as a separate video on the streamer's channel. Live streaming of games, but also other media, is an example of what Raysons calls the reconfiguration of play. Still, through the paratextual layers of the interface, the conversation experience becomes an example of the construction in the niche creative industries that is entirely a product of the collaboration between the streamer, the platform, and the audience. This can be quite simple, as with the case of the Kiwi Te Arawa woodcarver, whose stream went viral in early 2020 with this clip being shared on social media.
Wait, did someone give some subs? Ah, bro, you didn't have to. Can I give that money back? Kia ora. Is there any way I can give their money back? Oh, you too, and through. Once again, I'm telling you, you don't have to sub. Like, you don't have to. You can watch the stuff for free. Like, that's the best thing you can do. But please, hold on to your... Oh, I'm not a sub trainee, mate. Oh, can you, like, hold on to your fella's money? We're in the midst of a lockdown. Use it on your family, not me. No. Wait, there's someone...
Because the streamer, whose channel ID is Brox, is employed by New Zealand Tourism, his Twitch stream became a paratext to that industry. His goal during the shutdown was to get other carvers who are not employed to share their craft and their culture with the world. The subscriptions he received, however, meant that he could then engage in the niche creative industry of Twitch by employing others to develop emotes and bots and participate in the moderation for his channel. His streams are a mix of viewer chat and responding to questions in between carving.
Can you teach me how to carve? Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. So I was moulding out a piece of wood yesterday. So the piece, if you saw yesterday, I got a piece of native timber. And we're going to use that as a tutorial style piece of stream. Because so many people have been interested in learning. I just thought, oh, why not? Do a class. Let's have fun. If you fuck it up, who cares? I'll probably do mistakes too. I did mistakes on this carving on stream, but I didn't. They happen. No one's perfect. Well, I'm not any. Even the master carvers I learnt under have done mistakes, and they're like, carry on. It happened. Yeah, it's bad. Thanks, brother. Trying to go for the Witcher look. But, free.
A much more elaborate form of this conversational experience is the work of Twitch streamer The Sushi Dragon.
Thank you, Dimpies, for subscribing with the tier 1. Tier 1. Oh, man, I'm so sorry. I forgot to use this.
Hey, hey. I go for mine. I got to shine. Now throw your hands up.
Next time. Next time, baby.
Go for mine. I got to shine. Now throw your hands up in the sky. I go for mine. I got to shine. Now throw your hands up in the sky. I go for mine. I got to shine. Now throw your hands up in the sky. The life I live when I thought that I was gonna go crazy. And now my grandmama is the only girl calling me baby. If you really mean that, then put your hands up in
Unlike major Twitch micro-celebrities, Stephen Lee's persona goes beyond text and chat to include the contributions of his audience directly in his performance. Lee began on YouTube in 2011 with some viral videos, but he felt constrained by the professional codes of the platform. Many find the grind of the production cycle needed to maintain viral viewership on the platform to be unsustainable. If you are reliant on views rather than a community of engaged participants, then your revenue stream is going to be unpredictable. Lee started as an Overwatch streamer on Twitch, but he converted his apartment into a studio by painting the walls green, and he created a personal rig to wear so that he could pre-program key bindings for real-time visual effects, camera transitions, bots, responses, and so on. He got viewers to assign the music that he would dance and perform to, and paying tips puts your song to the top of the queue. This is a pretty ancient bardic tradition. Speculative collaboration can be thought of as the culmination of specialist knowledge, paratextual media, and the conversational experience operating via user-driven platforms. The bigger picture here is that Henry Jenkins anticipated this form of participatory media when he described internet-based audiences as migratory. When YouTube went through its first of 4 adpocalypses back in 2017, and the platform cracked down on certain types of content and different content creators, it began aggressively algorithmically tinkering to benefit legacy media content producers seeking ad revenue on the platform. Those creators had to co-locate their audiences away from the platform in order to both maintain their revenue streams and the conversational experience. 2 platforms that became important for this were Patreon and Discord. Patreon is a US-based platform created by Jack Conte and Sam Yam in 2013. Currently has around 3 million active users who are providing direct financial support for the content creation in videography, drawing and painting, comic artists and writers, podcasting, musicians, cosplayers, scientists, and other types of researchers. There is a huge range of educational opportunities on Patreon where you can learn to play the banjo or find out about architecture or even more specialist niches like sailing or 3D printing. Indeed, membership sites like Patreon are only likely to be more successful in the future as they offer an entirely different learning experience that benefits from both the expert and its community of participants. My area of interest is board games and tabletop game experiences. I began collecting miniature-based games during my PhD, and painting them has become an essential part of my mental health, providing relaxation and thinking time, doing something creative with my hands. Patreon has been an amazing location where I have been able to invest in this niche widely and support a range of Patreon experiences that then crosses over between YouTube, Twitch, and other social media platforms like Discord. This niche even has its own micro-celebrities from around the world, including Australians who produce content regularly and involve their Discord-based patron members in the production of their content. Discord is a freeware voice and video chat application that was initially made for gamers, but it has been embraced by a range of communities using the platform for education, business, healthcare, and other specializations. With more than 250 million users from around the world, Discord is both an old-style internet chat program and the new core for speculative collaboration and the conversational experience online. Of course, these platforms, as they become more successful, will inevitably end up compromising with the ideological forces that are involved in their regulation. Patreon has already been criticized by both sides of the left-right political spectrum for deplatforming content creators who fund projects with overt political content, and that is why some platforms like Indiegogo are now on the rise. The more significant point is that as an audience member, I get to reconfigure my participation on both of these platforms into direct collaboration with these content creators. I'm regularly chatting with them and being involved in the broader community of co-patrons and participants. Interpretation is actively welcome, and being a patron means I get to have a critical voice that exists beyond a downvote, a dislike, or a negative YouTube comment. This shifts the focus of encoding from discrete or even serialized content to an ongoing, unfinished, processual and experiential relationship based on the conversation and collaboration that is the reason for this model's success. So, to conclude, I think we can start to fill in some of the details of our participatory matrix. We can add a column for participant and patron, and we can start to plot the platforms like Discord and Patreon, as well as other sites like Kickstarter. And of course, you can throw in YouTube and social media platforms in the mix. And you might like to think about where you would place these and your own favorite platforms into this matrix. Where would Spotify sit, for example? So there we have it. Hopefully part 1 gave you a series of conceptual tools for thinking critically about audiences. And part 2 might have provided some ideas for planning future potential collaborations with audiences, or at least planted the idea of thinking about your audience as participants in your future media work. Thank you.